So for the fruit lattice, I'm going to start with making our pastry as we did before. In here I've got 200 grams of plain flour and 100 grams of butter. The butter has been cubed, makes it easier to rub in. So we're going to start by rubbing in the butter, the fat into the flour. So remember, we do this because we need to coat the grains of flour with a waterproof coat, and that's what prevents or makes the gluten short, as in short crust pastry. So use your fingertips, oops, making a mess, to rub it in until it resembles breadcrumbs. Should only take a couple of minutes. So that is pretty much done. Give it a shake while the big lumps come to the surface. Now you can use a combination of white and orange or yellow fat, so butter and the white fat being lard or Trex. However, for this I prefer just to use butter. Okay, so I'm now going to add water. It's really important not to add too much water. So I've got cold water here. I'm adding a tablespoon at a time. So I'm going to add one in first of all. And you must, don't you get your fingers in now, just use your knife to combine it, and it should slowly come together. Okay, I reckon I'm going to need between 2 and 3 water for this. So that's my second. Coming together but still a little bit dry at the edges. So I'm going to add one more. Now if you were going to be doing this in a mixer or like a food processor, it should come together naturally. Right, I'm happy with that, so now I can get my fingers in to bring it together. And you know you've got the right amount of liquid because you should be able to leave the bowl pretty clean. There shouldn't be any dry bits at the flour at the bottom. So you can see it's pretty clean. So what I'll do now is I'm just going to bring this together, and I'm now going to wrap it in cling film because it's important now to rest this and chill this. So I'm going to wrap it in cling film and then put it in the fridge for at least half an hour. In the meantime, I'll then get on with the fruit. So I'm now going to prepare my fruit. So you can put anything, any fruit into your fruit pie. I'm going to use 2 Bramley apples and 100 grams, which is a large handful of mixed berries. These are frozen berries. You could use a can of fruit, obviously just remove the fruit juice. Just see what you've got in the cup and see what you've got. So because these are eating apples, I don't need to peel them. If I'm using cooking apples, I would need to peel them. So I'm going to start by using the bridge technique, remember. So keep fingertips out the way, slice down. I've still got the core here, so I'm going to use the bridge technique again to cut in half. Now I want to cut the core out, so I'm going to have my knife at a 45-degree angle. Keep my fingertips out the way as a claw method. I'm going to cut diagonally down across, and that way you should remove the core. Now don't forget, so your last lesson you learnt that when some fruit and vegetables are cut and are exposed to oxygen, they become oxidated, so they become enzymic brown. So enzymic browning takes place. But if we immerse it in water or a little bit of lemon juice, then it prevents it from going brown. So once I've cut the apples, I'm then going to place them into there so they don't go brown. So enzymic browning is the process that occurs. And what I'm now going to do is I'm now going to dice them into cubes and then put them back in the water. Again, using the claw technique and the bridge technique to prevent injury. There we go. Okay, so they can remain in there while I prepare everything else. Okay, so now I want to gently cook the apples, not too much, just to soften them slightly. So I'm placing them into the saucepan. Now you can see I'm adding a little bit of the water from the apples to cook with them. A little bit of the water. Okay. So I'm just going to let them cook for a little bit and soften before adding the other mixed fruit and a tablespoon of icing sugar. Okay, so I'm now going to add a tablespoon of icing sugar. You can use normal sugar, but I quite like to use icing sugar with this. So a bit of icing sugar. So the apple's been stewing for about 5 minutes. I'm now going to add the other fruit into the saucepan. It's a nice bit of splash of colour. And then cook that out again for another couple of minutes. Now of course fruit contains water, so as it cooks a little bit some water is going to be removed, so it has a little bit of sauce. If, depending on what fruit you use, if it is quite liquidy, then add a little bit more icing sugar, and what that will do is the starch in that will then thicken it. As you can see, I've got a nice bit of sauce. Now in your pie you want a little bit of sauce, you don't want it too liquidy. I'm quite happy with that, but if I wanted to add a little bit more I could add some water from the bowl of apples that I had. Okay, it doesn't need to be properly cooked, but I'm just going to turn that off now. And I'm just going to leave that off the hob just to cool for a bit, and I'm going to get my pastry out and start to shape that now. So I've placed my oven on to 180 degrees, that's warming. I'm removing my pastry from the fridge. Now I want to cut this into 2 pieces, one for the bottom, one for the top. However, my bottom piece needs to be bigger than my top, so if that's half, I'm probably going to cut about that much off for the top. I'm going to wrap the topping part up, put that back in the fridge, and I'll prepare the base. So a little bit of flour on the work surface, a little bit on my rolling pin. Now remember, this isn't bread dough, don't treat it like bread dough, so nice and gently. Now look, it is slightly cracked, that's fine because it is a short crust pastry. So if it is cracked, it means it's going to be nice and flaky and short. So I'm going to keep rotating the pastry around so it doesn't stick. And I want it to remain circular because that's the tin I'm putting it into. So whenever you make pastry, as long as you've got, or short crust pastry, as long as you've got half the amount of fat to flour, you should end up with perfect pastry. Just size check. I'm now going to line the case, so remember being gentle. So I'm going to carefully roll the pastry over the top of the rolling pin. Now because this is quite a lightweight tin, if I now try and flop this over, it's going to move. So I'm going to have to try and do this carefully. Perfect. If I just push it down now and make holes, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to carefully lift each of the sides and just let it fall into the middle. Okay, and then once that's occurred, I can then lift the sides and then use the back of my finger to press it into, not the corner because it's circular, but you know, where the base meets the sides. So you've got a nice edge so that all the juices and the fruit can get to the very edge. Okay. Okay. Happy with that. Now what I'm going to do is, because the pie mix I'm adding has got a little bit of liquid, if I add it in with the pastry raw, the base is going to still be sort of soggy. It's got a soggy bottom. So what I want to do is I want to partly bake the pastry, only partly, so that when it's all done, the base is nice. So I'm just going to get a fork and prick the bottom. Okay, I'm then going to place some greaseproof paper into the bottom. I'll use proper greaseproof paper, baking paper. If you screw it up first, then open it out and lay it into the base. Now if you've got baking beans, you can use them. If not, I've just got a pot of rice that I just used for this precise thing. And you're going to fill, just like you did with a quiche, just fill the base with some rice, and this prevents the pastry from rising. So I'm just going to force it out to weight it down. Okay. I'm just going to trim, not all of it off, but trim some of the pastry off, because when it's cooked a little bit, it will shrink. So I'm not going to trim it properly until I've put my top part on. So I'm just going to take off some of the pastry, not all of it. There we go, I could use scissors. Okay, so that's just taken off some of the pastry. Okay, I'm going to place it onto a baking tray, and I'm just going to bake it blind. It's called baking blind, for about 5 to 10 minutes. Okay, and I'll tidy up and I'll show you what to do with the topping. So this is the bit I cut off from the pastry, and it's the bit I've got left in the fridge. So I could, if I want to make just like a fruit pie, just roll it out like I did for the base and just lay it on as a lid. But to create a fruit lattice is the shape, the things that you do on top. So you're sort of weaving, as you can see in the PowerPoint I've attached with this video. It's just crisscrossing strips. So what you're going to do is you're going to roll out the pastry. This time I don't want it circular, I want to be kept as a rectangle. Again, keep moving it around so it doesn't stick. There's a little bit more flour. Need to fill it up. Sticky there. Rotate it. Okay, so what I'm now going to do, sort of the thickness I want. Now I'm going to just neaten the edges to make it into a rectangle. So I'm just going to trim the edges to make it into a rectangle. So now I want to create equally width strips that I'm going to crisscross on the top to make the lattice. Okay, so they're all ready when it comes out the oven, partly baked. So I've removed the partly baked pastry from the oven. I'm going to carefully lift this out. I can keep the rice for another time. So this is, as you can see, it's slightly changed colour. So it's partly baked, which is what I want. So I'm going to carefully now pour my fruit into the base. Okay, perfect quantity. And now with using the lid of the pastry, I'm going to I've got 3 going on. So I'm going to lift one there and one there and place that one like that. And then I'm going to lift the middle one, place that one like that, and then lift the end ones for this one. So now you've created the lattice. Okay. I'm now going to use my knife to trim the edges. Okay. Now the tin is a little bit warm, so remember how we did it before. So I'm using the knife in a downwards motion. So I finished trimming the edges. Remember using the knife going around in a downward motion around the side. With any excess pastry, I've cut out some shapes. I've cut out an apple. It looks like a pumpkin, but I've put a leaf to make it less look like a pumpkin. I've got an egg here, which I'm going to glaze the pastry with. Let's give it a nice brown colour to dextrinise the pastry. I'm going to lay my apple in the middle. So a little bit there to stick the leaf on. I'm going to glaze this as well. There we go. So I'm now going to place this into the oven for about 25 to 30 minutes until it's nice and golden brown.